Yes, you can.
Okay. Hey, everyone, we're live on YouTube. So, Tim, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me?
I got you. Krista?
Yep, I can hear you.
Great. Troy, can you hear me?
Yep, loud and clear.
And I can hear you. So we've got a quorum. We're waiting for Courtney and Barb to sign in. Because I think Anna's going to be late. But we are live feeding now, so you can mute. Ethan's on.
Cubby. Hey, Cubby.
Hey,
Cubby, hi.
how's everyone doing?
Glad you could join us.
Yeah, glad to be here.
How's virtual schooling?
Going well so far. Yeah,
Good. We'll talk more about that when we get the student report. Okay.
gotcha.
Once you get rolling, I'm gonna pop down, make sure I'm cabled. I don't have cable up here. Actually, when you guys just wanna watch the clock and start when you're ready, because it is
Okay.
going on YouTube.
We're
I
good.
just gotta double check my cable.
Okay.
Courtney's on.
Hi, Courtney. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Hi, gang.
Hello.
Hey, Courtney.
How are you, Tim?
Great. Just grand.
Hey, I saw Nina's good news. How exciting.
Ooh, very exciting.
Congratulations.
We're going out live, Courtney, so. just
Okay.
a warning.
Okay.
But it
Thanks,
is a
Courtney.
Wienermobile. It's hard not to do backflips over the Wienermobile.
That is an exciting thing. It's going to be a great year.
You gonna get a ride?
Oh, yeah. It's got 6 extra seats in it.
Okay, we're gonna book some of us. Hey, Barb. Hi, Barb. Barb, can you hear me?
Yep.
Great. All right, there you go. You have to move you away from the window a little bit if you can, if at all possible.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, we just got glare behind you. Can you log in? Yep. All right. Oh, we may have lost Barb.
Can I help you here?
Barb, you still there?
I think she's just replugging her laptop in.
Yeah. There we go. Okay. Hi, Barb. Can you hear us?
Yep.
Much better. Thanks. Do you know if Heather's on?
She is not on yet. She was planning on being on, but then has to jump off at 7:30
Right.
because her husband has a call.
cars.
Hey, Mike.
Hello, Tim.
How are you?
I'm good. How are you doing?
I am just grand, thank you.
Heather just jumped on to speak.
All set?
Yep.
Okay, it being 6:30, I'll call to order meeting of the Oregon School District Board of Education. Today is Monday, April 13th, 2020. The time is 6:30 PM. We are participating remotely. I am at the Innovation Center with Dr. Bustler and Katie Heights. Katie, could you call the roll?
Miss Beanie,
Present.
Ms. Oderico,
Here.
Ms. Flanagan,
Here.
Mr. Pankratz,
Here.
Ms. Bijak, Mr. LeBrun,
Here.
Mr. Zach.
Feedback on how it's going. I think that's a great thing that we've been doing. But yeah, it's going well. Definitely miss being at school for sure. I didn't think I would catch myself saying that, but here I am.
Kind of a strange last semester.
That's for sure. Yeah.
So Dr. Bustler and I are continuing to talk, and we'll continue to talk to the board about graduation ceremonies and how that might work, okay?
Okay.
Well, it's an important milestone for you guys.
Mm.
Good.
Hey,
Thanks.
Steve,
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I just want to step back to the last item quickly. I did hear from two parents who have juniors, and they both want to make sure that the message gets clear that junior prom is a big miss this year. And if there's some way they can carve that into next year, it would be so greatly appreciated.
Great. Thanks for that information, Tim. If you can let those folks know that you communicated that at our board meeting.
Will do. Thank you.
Okay, great. Anything more, Cubby?
Yeah, just that I know that there's a lot of uncertainty. You mentioned graduation among, especially the seniors, juniors as well. Just that if you have any information at all regarding, graduation, it would be greatly appreciated by, the senior class. But as we all know, it's up in the air right now. So.
Right. The discussion that Dr. Bustler and I have had right now is that we'd like to do anything possible to try to continue that, to have some sort of physical presence graduation as a, go away for the seniors, particularly since you've been separated the whole semester, basically. And so we're gonna let it play out a little bit so that, the obvious reaction right now would be to cancel it. And we're going to try to see how this develops, to see if there's any means by which we can do something in terms of a physical graduation. So tell your folks to hang with it, that we understand the importance of that ceremony for you guys.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Laura Stoller just jumped on, so.
Okay.
Go back.
Hi, Laura. Laura Stoller? Going once?
Yes, I'm here. Sorry.
Hi there. Okay, we bopped over you with the OEA report. Do you have anything for us?
No, just that we are very appreciative of the collaboration we've been able to put forth with all of this, and we'll just keep trucking along.
Great, thanks. And we'll be on for tomorrow, or we're on for Wednesday. Yeah.
Yes.
We're in weekly leaders meetings, board members, and virtual leader meetings, so we'll have another one on Wednesday. And Brian reports back on those. Okay, that takes us out of the informational items. Let's go to action items, and that's the staffing plan. And Brian, do you want to start off with this?
Sure, I can get us started quickly. Board members, I'd like to draw your attention to the addendum that we prepared for your consideration tonight. Last week, we had a conversation about a number of items with regards to the staffing plan. And just as a reminder, remember our 2020-21 staffing plan. The cornerstone for this is our District 5 values. It's our goal to provide you with the best plan possible to meet the needs of all students in the district. And secondly, the board feedback that you provided to us last week on April 7th was valuable, and we intend to accurately address the feedback in our final recommendation. A couple of the items that you noted for our consideration was providing an estimate of potential revenue given all the variables in play with state funding, growth, etc. for next year. I particularly appreciated someone that said, we understand this is like throwing a dart at the wall because it's not a perfect science. You also asked for prioritizing the staffing plan's new positions so you can clearly see the projected priorities. We've done that. There was also a request to identify fixed and variable costs. I think we called them fixed and flexible costs, but the concept was around a variable cost. We also contemplated and we've identified a big picture estimate of $200,000 of internal reallocations, and that money would be or will be finalized in the weeks ahead to ensure that the future investments are the best choices that we can make. And then lastly, we heard board members talk about the importance of investing in infrastructure supports such as administrative staffing for student achievement and instruction, administrative interns, associate principals, and pupil services staffing. So we believe we have identified all 5 points. We're happy to go into more detail. What I would like to do is ask Andy to walk through the revenue situation, and then Gina will walk through the projected expenses. And I almost forgot, there was a turn that there was a little turn of events in the state budget on Thursday and Friday. There was a legislative proposal that was being routed that would remove the governor's final decision-making authority relative to school funding for next year and into the future. And that initial legislation called for the Joint Finance Committee to be making those decisions. Then late in the day on Friday, after I'd written an update to you, the legislature reversed that track, and the Joint Finance Committee, as I understand it from conversation with the WASB, did not include that in the final legislative package. So
Right, that's out.
So the final decision-making on school funding levels, or what I would describe as current law, which currently exists, plus or minus any legislative changes, will require the governor's approval.
I will note that Anna is now with us. Welcome, Anna, and she joined at 6:43.
Thank you. Hi.
Hello, did you get your cupcake?
It's in the fridge, but it's tempting me.
It's good. Okay. So Brian, so what we're going to do is have Andy and Gina do a brief overview of their respective portions of this, the revenue and expense side. And then I'll walk through individually with each of you if you have any specific questions about the additional information that we have received or any clarification that you need. And then we'll get into the recommendation at that point. So we'll go first presentation, then questions about what's in there, and then getting into the recommendation. So Andy, you're first up.
All right, thank you. So Table A, under section 1 of the addendum, basically kind of walks you through a couple different scenarios as far as the revenue. You can see that line 1 is basically kind of our best guess at this point in time as far as increase in student enrollment. And if you looked at the sheet from last week, we were talking about 150. Because of the impact of the pandemic, we've reduced that down to 75. And we feel reasonably comfortable with that number. So we kept that in all the 4 different scenarios that are there. So the 282, 725 exists there. The next item, number 2, is obviously more connected to the state budget. You can see it going from current law, which is about 925,000, down to 0 as kind of the worst case would see that. So a lot more impacted by the state and their finances. The next item is the revenue cap. I'm sorry, the per pupil increase. This is a smaller amount of money. It's a categorical aid per student that we receive. It is not as influenced by state law, and we believe politically that it's probably would stay very similar to what's in current law. If it was rolled back, it would have a fairly minor impact. The next item, number 4, I actually forgot to update the description, so I apologize for that. The numbers are correct, but it is assuming a 35 increase in open enrollment throughout the entire school district. We reviewed our open enrollment applications. We have close to mid-90s, I believe, to close to 100 applications. Some of those are 4K students, so we don't get full FTE on it. But we said, well, we would open the door a little bit and try to get to 35. Open enrollment has an immediate impact on our finances because unlike the revenue limit formula where you get 1/3 of the students each year, the open enrollment, you receive the full dollar amount year 1. And that dollar amount is slated to go to $8,125 this next year. Again, something that politically, probably not something that the legislature would touch at this point in time. So we feel fairly confident on that number of 321,000, and we kept that in all our different scenarios. Special education increased funding percentage. We started with the 338, and obviously that would be impacted by the state budget. So we took that down to 0 as we went to the right to the equation there. And then the Forest Edge referendum, the new school referendum that was placed on the ballot, that would be a consistent number as well. We have the authority to raise those funds to open the new school. So and then on the bottom, you can see the impact of all those numbers added together. I guess I'll just ask for if there's any questions.
All right, let's walk through with any questions. Barb, any questions of Andy on the revenue side?
Or Mike's.
Yeah. You can
No,
just,
no questions.
okay. Troy?
Andy, on line 4, what do the numbers 14, 12, 10, 8 mean?
Yeah, originally I was going to stagger the number of students that we received. So I apologize, I should have updated that. That should just say 35 students, and I kept that all the way through. Originally, I was going to be a little bit more conservative at the time before we had a discussion administratively, and we got the numbers from the applications. And so I was going to do 14 in the first column, 12, 10, and then 8.
Oh, okay. So it's 35 across the board. Okay, thank you.
Now 95 across the board.
Thank you.
Any more, Troy?
No, just that one.
Okay. Tim?
Same line item, Andy. Line item 4. I think that was 0 the last time we got together to talk about this. Is it, we've got 100 applications and we're looking at 35. How are we prioritizing those? Are we trying to free ourselves up as our own not our own population, but our district specific population starts to grow? Or is it first in, first accepted? What kind of criteria are we going to use?
Sure. Well, Gina might jump in here, but basically we can open the number of spots by grade level. So we'll look at our certain grade levels. Like we specifically talked about not taking students at the middle school level. We don't have a significant amount of applications in that area anyhow, but that would compound a problem that we have right now with growth. But the other, once you open up those slots, then I believe there's a drawing process that has to happen for the number of students in that spot. So say there's 20 trying to get in at second grade, that we're going to open up 10 spots, then we would draw out a hat, try to figure out which 10
Okay,
of the
so
20.
real
There is,
randomized process. Okay.
yeah, there is some priorities that we can give to siblings and those types of things, but it does have to be, I think, fairly random after that.
Okay. Thank you, Andy.
Yep.
Anything more, Tim?
No, that's it. Thank you.
Okay, Anna,
No questions on the revenue side. I appreciate this table. It's helpful.
Courtney,
No questions.
Krista,
Just want to make sure I understand with revenue line item 1. So our original staffing plan was a prediction of an increase of 150 students, and now you've cut that in half to 75. Are you feeling like, you know, the 150 I think you felt was aggressive, 775, I guess I'm trying to understand your opinion of where that's at. Is that conservative? Is that feeling much more comfortable to you? Or are we somewhere in between?
I'm fairly comfortable there. You know, it's all a matter of time, right? And we all want the crystal ball to figure out when the economy starts going. I have talked to a couple realtors and a real estate attorney. I'm understanding that there are people out there looking still, and there are people still purchasing homes. So I think I'm kind of in the middle of the road right now. 150 was aggressive. We only seen that a couple times in my 20-some years here in the district. But I think 75 with the new neighborhood that's coming online with Terra Bessa and some of the other growth, I think I feel fairly comfortable with that. I would mention though that even if I was off a little bit, that is a revenue that grows or is impacted, not impacted as much because of the averaging factor of it. So even if we're off by 5 or 10 or something like that, we're not talking significant amounts of money in that particular line item.
anything more, Krista?
No, I'm good.
Great.
Steve, I just have a follow-up question about that.
Yep, go ahead, Tim.
Andy, just as a benchmark, if we were tracking right in line with the Roffers projections, what would that number be this year?
It'd probably be in the 300 to 400 range.
Okay. All right. I just wanted to get a sense of how far we're behind in terms of that growth. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yep.
One of the things we talked about, Tim, was at the appropriate time in the next year or so is to revisit with Mark where we're at in tracking, because there's a certain degree of variability given the build out of the various developments. So I think maybe right now is not the right time to look at that, but within the next year, I think we're going to take a look.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that would be prudent for sure.
Yeah, I know we've talked about build out of Terra Bessa and other places being basically a year behind what the projections were. So give them a chance to catch up and see, you know, where we're at in the factors, whether we're working on a year delay or what. So.
Very good. Thank you.
Went by Terra Bessa today and it was a few more homes that are already popped out of the ground. So there's probably about 15 or 16 already in that one area.
Yeah, absolutely.
Good spring. Okay, Brian you had a point, Brian?
Yes, this is just a reminder. I'm going to ask Andy to walk through 2 items that the board requested information on. The first item was the fund balance projection June 30th, 2020, which means at the end of this school year. And then the second item was the district's fund balance as of June 30th. And those were considerations that we talked about and that you said you wanted some confirmation on. So just understand we still have the dart. We're still projecting because it's not over yet. So Andy, would you walk through those 2, please? Thank you.
You bet. We took a quick look last week. Cara Newton and I went through kind of the line items that were left in the budget and kind of tried to project them forward. Obviously, salaries are going to be where they are. There are some line items related to overtime, some other things that were left over. But as we went through there, we tried to identify dollars that would be underutilized. And then assumed also some other budgets that we'll be having discussions with different departmental heads and principals on. And we think it's conceivable that we would have a fund balance unspent of, I thought I had a range, 1.1 to $1.6 million unspent at the end of this year. I think it's very, very plausible that we'll hit in that number. And then the other thing that I mentioned in that next paragraph is you have to understand too that we had basically assigned fund balances of $1.4 million that didn't have a revenue connected to them. Those assigned fund balances were put into the expenditure side of our budget as well. So you'd have to kind of add those two numbers together to see what the number was left on the expenditure budget. The 1.1 to 1.6 is really related to revenue, where the 2.54 to $3 million is related to the revenue that would be left over from this particular budget, plus the unassigned balances that might not be spent at that time. Some of those budgets might be spent. It really will depend on when we put in an order for Chromebooks at the high school specifically. And then we're also looking to put in a new playground at Netherwood, where the Netherwood school was planning to use some of their assigned fund balance to spend that carryover, if you would. So that's that should grow the fund balance this next year, assuming that some other unknown expense doesn't pop into our radar over the next couple months. Fund balance, so that still is a dart, as Dr. Busler said. Fund balance as of June 30th, I love to talk about certainties when I can. I don't always get to do that, but this is a certainty. These are the dollars that are available. There was a question about how large the fund balance was at the end of last fiscal year, and I mentioned it was in the $12 million range. That is accurate. We were at about $12.7 million. However, there is some of that money that is not spendable, if you would. Part of that fund balance was related to the construction lots for the Panther School construction homes. Part of that was related to self-funded dental insurance. And then part of it was related to what I was mentioning before, the $1.4 million in assigned fund balances that were carried over from prior years for mostly departments, and then some school balances as well. So if you took those items out of the fund balance, we're closer to about $1.3 million of unassigned fund balance that we typically used for cash flow purposes throughout the year. Let's see. And then I mentioned just briefly state finances, which it seems inconceivable at this point in time, but not that long ago, a few months ago, actually, the legislature and governor were talking about that our revenues were exceeding our expenditures projected through the end of the biennium, which is still a year and a few months out. And the article specifically talked about that was great. There was the article put in a couple different numbers in there, but I think the number that I jumped on was the $452 million more than was projected at this point in time at the end of the biennium. And that was really positive news. Actually, at one point in time, it's on the fund balance, the general fund balance to the state had reached $1 billion for the first time ever. So that was good. They were projected to spend some of that down over the next biennium. And then they talked about gap funding, which is how the school district runs, where you basically are recognizing revenues, which makes sense to recognize them at that time, and expenses that are also out there that you should recognize. The state of Wisconsin works kind of more on a cash funded basis. If you look at the gap funded basis, unfortunately, we are one of 3 states that would have a negative fund balance at the end of the fiscal year, which does put us in a situation where if you have an economic downturn, it can be difficult. So I thought that was a little informative as well as we kind of go through this, that the state of Wisconsin is doing better than it has in about 30 years, but we're still not maybe as strong as we'd like to be.
But Andy, to me, budgetary structural gap that the state had, where they were spending money that they thought they had, but creating a fiscal gap, to me, urges caution in doing something with these fund balance numbers that creates a need for a budgetary hole to place them in succeeding years without creating that kind of structural gap. I mean, I don't want
Correct.
that same game.
Yep. Same exact thing. I always say, if you're going to spend fund balance, that's fine. Things come up. This would definitely fit in that category by no stretch of imagination. The problem is that when you get into the next budget, kind of your first line item that you have to fund is the revenue that you took out of the fund balance. So it makes it, you're setting yourself up for some harder decisions down the road.
Okay, in terms of, my questions that I had on the revenue side, and I'll go back to board members if you had anything on the fund balance, but in terms of guessing what the state's gonna be doing revenue-wise, for the up estimate, to me, I can't conceive of the state cutting more than 25% from that, because we're in pretty good financial shape and could absorb that into our budget. If that happens, if there's that significant of a cut statewide, I just can't imagine what that would do to at least half of the school districts in this state. So I'm thinking, my sense is 75% is probably as drastic as a cut as we would probably see. I can't imagine a 50% scenario statewide. Is that kind of your thought process, or if you had to, do you foresee anything less than 75% or smaller than 75%?
Are you asking me, Steve? Zandy. Yeah. I feel pretty comfortable knowing who's sitting in the governor's seat, to be blatant about it. The governor is a huge supporter of education, and I think him having the veto ability that he has helps us feel a little bit more comfortable that 75% is a good number, that we would maintain at least that level of funding.
So one question on open enrollment. We get 100% of the state aid on open enrollment in year one, but that's only at what, 75% of what we would get for a resident-based student?
No, they've been increasing that dollar amount fairly significantly. So we're in the 11,000 range once a student has been here for 3 years, compared to 8,000. So 11/8, I guess, or I'm sorry, 8/11 would be about what we're getting for open enrollment. The open enrollment number has been coming up. It wasn't that long that it was $6,000, and now it's over 8.
Okay, so it's better than in the past, but it's not 100% as a 3-year resident here.
Correct. But that first year, the impact is hard to ignore, because basically you've gotten 2 years the average, right from the get-go almost.
And this is a Gina question. One of the reasons that we started to narrow the number of slots available for open enrollment was just because of our projected growth. With 35, it does not seem to me, if we open the door for 35 more, that's not going to limit our capacity in the other buildings as we move forward. If we restrict the number that might filter into the middle school and Rome Corners during this interim phase. Is that kind of what the planning is, or where the 35 would be selected from?
You're exactly right. We will bring you a proposal the first meeting in June. That's the first meeting by law where we can open more spaces. So we'll have a recommendation for you about which grade levels we feel we should open and how many spots.
Are you looking for a recommendation or approval tonight of, in concept, for a budgetary reason, opening up that at the first possible point, or not tonight?
No, I wasn't, because we can't do that until June, but just wanted to let you know where we're looking at the numbers and foreshadowing that we plan to come back in June to ask you for more spaces, given the number of applications that we received and the growth that we're projecting.
So that consideration for that would be tonight in what we're comfortable tonight in approving, knowing that in June we would come back and visit that, and there would be a $300,000 revenue source that we could tap if we needed it.
Correct. And also we based our projections on the 75% cut in state funding. So if that isn't cut, we have a really, I think we're taking a very conservative approach to our recommendation today, knowing that we can always change that later.
Does any board member have any question about the fund balance numbers that Andy just went through? I'm not going to go through the list, but just pipe in, and if nobody pipes in a couple seconds, I'll move on.
Andy, this is Troy. Is there a number that of that 1.1 to 1.6 million that's remaining from this fiscal year? Is there a rough number that you have in your head for what portion of that would be attributed to the downtime that we've had?
Yeah, I mean, I would say the majority of it. We're looking at utilities expenses and those types of things. A lot of that is influenced by not running the buildings. Some of it's influenced by the energy market as well, which, has kind of been impacted by the pandemic as well. But yeah, the majority of it would be influenced by being shut down.
Okay, so it's all really in kind of outside of where our budget was at the beginning of this fiscal year. Okay,
Yep.
Thank you.
Anybody else with any questions on fund balance? Hearing none, Gina, let's go to the expenditure side then.
Okay, so going to part 2, significant expenditures. We put the following tables together to answer questions from the last 2 meetings that we've had. So table B, we categorize the expenses on what we really feel is fixed versus where the board would have more flexibility in the future. So for example, line 1, the educator compensation plan. If you remember, we have the 3 different levels in the plan. And so that budget estimate is looking at current staff, how much it would cost for the staff members who are changing levels next year. And so we categorize that as a fixed cost because that plan was adopted by the board and the educators would be moving next year. Compare that to line 2, where that would be any increase to the levels of those plans. And that is something where we have more flexibility because we do need to bargain that with the OEA. And that's not that bargaining process takes time and isn't a decision that we would need to make tonight. Again, line 3, similarly with non-OEA staff members, we had talked in March about doing a wage increase of 1.81 to 2% to really be more in line with other Dane County similar schools. But we have more flexibility in that, and that's not a decision that we need to make tonight. WRS and FICA, sort of a hybrid because we're required to pay that. So if you look at the movement of the schedule, the fixed is $30,000 to pay for that movement. But then the number varies depending on what we do with wage increases. 5 is the health insurance increase. That is a fixed cost because we have signed that contract with Unity. 6 would be other insurance increases. Again, our workers' comp and our property insurance went up, but we did not have an increase in dental, life, or long-term disability. So that was good news for next year. Line 7 is transportation contractors increase. We have traditionally given the contractors an increase when we've increased other staff, but that is a more flexible number. And then I did take the stipend to 4K provider increase and put that in this table because that is something we have flexibility on, and that might also depend on what the state funding looks like as well. Line 9, Forest Edge Elementary School, we labeled that as fixed because that money can only be spent on Forest Edge. And then again, the increased transportation for routes to that school. And then finally, we committed as a team to look at our budget line by line and committed to reallocate 200,000 to alleviate some of those fixed costs. So if you look at line 13, we have total fixed costs of $250,000 after we reallocate 200,000. We've got, if you take out Forest Edge, we have about 623 to 641,000 in flexibility. Well, what questions do you have for me on table B?
Krista, I'm gonna go reverse wise now. Any
Just,
questions?
yeah, just have a couple. So on the educator compensation plan increase, line 2 and then line 3, you said, those are flexible and that we don't have to make a decision tonight. So what are you saying that if we approve that as part of the staffing plan tonight, that you're still going to come back to us with the plan or with a recommendation for what those would be or what the plan is to allocate that money? I guess I'm not sure what you're saying there.
Yes, so our recommendation tonight would be we would hold on those 2 items. And as soon as we had more certainty in what the state funding might be, as well as our growth this summer, that we would come back and look at a proposal. Because normally at this time of year, we do approve a wage increase for staff. So we're not asking the board to do that tonight. We'd like to get a little more certainty around the state budget and then come back to the board. And hopefully we will be comfortable with giving a wage increase to employees.
So are you asking us tonight to approve all the fixed and hold on the flexibility ones that are labeled that way? Are you saying you would like us to look at approving fixed and flexibility, but you'd come back to us with? I guess I'm trying to understand what you're asking potentially for us to approve tonight.
So we're asking you to approve the staffing recommendations in table 1, 2, and table 1 and 2 and 3. So
Okay.
table B is just to give you a picture of what the finances will look like in order for you to feel comfortable doing that.
Okay. Then next question is in terms of bus contractors, are we currently paying them through COVID? Or are they not being paid right now?
We are paying them the base cost, and Andy can talk more about this, but we're not paying mileage.
We were actually discussing paying them a portion of mileage because of a discussion that I think we've had in the past with trying to pay the drivers. So the contractors are being paid their base wages, which basically pays for their buses. Probably all of them have bus payments since buses are not cheap items. But we wanted to save on the mileage because a component of that is obviously fuel and maintenance on the vehicles. But also a component of that would be driver's fees or driver's payroll. So we've been having a discussion with them and should have some information in the next week or 2 to try to identify how much of that we would be willing to pay in order to get the drivers paid as well.
So what did we approve previously as part of the payment while school's not in session? We just approved that we're paying them base costs right now?
Yeah, if you looked,
Okay.
I think if you looked on the bills payable, you would just see the base cost at this point in time.
And then same question with 4K. We are paying 4K like we are paying our teaching staff right now.
So that's a little bit more complicated because there's a number of different contractors involved in that. But for the most part, I would say that our 4K teachers who are employees of those organizations are being paid like they would be normally paid. But there are a couple little exceptions to that, one of which we were working on today. So, but we have paid all that we would normally have paid. That payment, the second payment that we do to our contractors, our 4K partners, was actually paid in either January or February. So they got their full year amount of money, those partners. So we then have been talking to them and saying, hey, we'd really like you to pay the teachers. Plus, we are utilizing those teachers. They are reaching out and helping teach the students at home.
Yes, but they're not our employees, so we don't have control over whether they're paid by the community provider or not.
Right.
Right. So this, what you're talking about for the additional stipend next year. So we do not pay them. This would go to the centers that, with the understanding that they would pay that to the teachers.
Right, and so that was in our original staffing report that we are going to ask the board to approve that $100 increase, but we are not asking for that tonight. We would see how the state funding would look, and we would come back at a later time and make a recommendation to you.
Okay, thank you.
And Krista, I think we'll keep track for you if we have any issues with the 4K providers. We have made the payment on the basis that that goes to our 4K instructors, and I'll continue to work with Brian on what the status is of those who have not made those payments. Not very many, but the intent was that they continue to get paid, so we'll keep you updated on that. But
Great, thank you.
asking that question. And Gina, just to clarify again, is that the recommendation would be that the fixed costs on table B that are identified in 1 through 11, that we're going to approve those tonight, and we're going to hold off on the flexible ones and decide that when we get a better budget picture later on.
That's correct.
Okay, great. All right, Courtney, any questions off of that table B, the first part of Gina's discussion?
No, not really. I saw the note that said this does not include cost savings from reimagining summer school. Do we feel like that will factor into the staffing decision-making for 2021, or is that just sort of its own separate standalone entity?
That's really, I'll correct you if you don't say it correctly.
Perfect.
Okay. The answer is, I think there is some flexibility there. The flexibility, summer school is kind of an odd thing. It's separated by a fiscal year, typically in the middle or real close to the middle of it. We've actually intentionally moved it to start in July, but there's a lot of ordering that happens left. So if I were to look in the 2019-20 budget this year, there's actually like $78,000 that's left unspent. So if we don't have to order materials and all those types of things, then that money will go unspent into this year. And then there would be a large amount of money, obviously, for all the salaries that would be budgeted for 2020, 2021 that could be unspent for next year. The problem is that the FTE connected to all of that does not go into our revenue limit formula until for another year. So if we don't have summer school FTE, then the following year we will not have a significant amount of revenue.
That's right. You did talk about that last time. I am sorry. Now that refreshes my memory. The catch-22 we have if we don't include those costs in our budget. I thank you. You brought me back to our last conversation, and now I recall. So thank you, Andy. Appreciate that.
Yep.
Yes, and just to add to that, depending on what happens, we know schools are already asking for a legislative fix for that problem, but it would need a legislative fix. It's not something DPI feels they have the authority to do.
They clarified that with 2 mailings today.
Mm-hmm.
Got it.
My mind is we have that 1-year gap in summer school students that is being allocated into our revenue stream. If that gap is there, that might be a place where we could slide in some fund balance dollars because it's a one-time absence.
So I want to, you're right, and we could intentionally do that. I want to make it slightly more complicated because the summer school is actually averaged into the 3-year average. So it would be an impact for 3 years.
Right.
The good news is that 1 year that we would be missing the FTE year should be an impact for 3 years.
Can you say that again? Because you kind of froze up on our end.
Sure, I'm sorry about that. So the impact, because it's a 3-year average, the impact's not huge in one particular year. It's a third to some degree of the impact, but you would have that reduction of dollars to fund summer school, it would last 3 specific years, and it's delayed by a year.
And what is the annual summer school revenue that we get?
Oh, it's been a weekend, long weekend. I want to say it's in the $400,000 range, something like that.
Per year?
Yes.
Okay. So if we have a $1.2 million fund balance add-on this year because of unexpended or
Yep.
expenditures, we know that we've got that in fund balance, so a third of that would be 400 roughly, or a little under 400. We could, if we don't have summer school this year, we could, in our back of our minds, say we could allocate off that for the next 3 budgets.
Absolutely. There's a way to do it. It's just that it has a long-term impact.
Okay, good. Tim, any other questions?
Yeah, Dr. Bustler, what kind of lead time would you say before we make a final decision on summer school? I mean, it's not a game day call by any stretch. So at what point do we say, you know what, we're going to have a reimagined summer school, or we're not going to have a summer school?
I would say clearly by the second week in May, when we're back for our May board meeting, and possibly even before that. We know that the stay-at-home order expires on April 24th. We are anticipating that we'll get more direction on the stay-at-home order, which obviously will impact if and when schools can be reopened. We already feel a little bit behind the game in terms of summer school, because summer school is less than 2 months away. And tomorrow at our administrative team meeting, we're going to be doing some advanced planning for events that we're either scheduled in April, in May, or June. And we're also starting to look at July and August, because next school year is just right around the corner. So I would say that second meeting, or that first meeting in May, we should have a go, no-go decision based on everything that we've been able to learn and compile so far.
Okay, thank you.
I'm using that dart that all of you gave me.
Sure,
last
understood.
week.
Anything else, Tim?
No, nothing else.
Okay, thanks. Troy, you're up.
I do not have any additional questions on table B.
Barb?
No questions.
Okay, and I don't either. So Gina, I think we've got that table B done now. You've got a couple more tables to go through, right?
Yes, I do. So
Okay.
I'm going to go through tables 1, 2, and 3, and these are the positions that we are recommending the board approve tonight.
Okay, and that's on page 4, 5, and 6 then of the addendum that came out this week.
Yes.
Okay, go
So
ahead.
I will tell you our rationale as we go through. So in table 1, there was a question last time about, well, which positions are legally required? Which ones do we have to fill? So we know that we have a student who will need sign language as part of that student's programming. So we need to add a sign language paraprofessional for that student. So we're asking the board to approve that. Additionally, we may need to add a special education teacher once we look at the IEP needs of the students coming to us. But if we do need to add that, that would come from the special education grant. So that isn't a Fund 10 request, but we would like authority to fill that position if we need that. And we should have a sense of that in mid-May, once we know our students that will be at Forest Edge and where, what the needs of the students look like at each of the elementary schools. So we would like the board to approve that. So should we need it, we could get that posted and filled, because those special education is becoming a hard to fill area.
But it's cost neutral in terms of our expenditure versus revenue budget.
It is, yes.
Okay.
but it is an additional position, so wanted the board approval for that. Then moving into table 2, these are positions that are reallocations from the current budget. And again, in terms of timing and planning for next year, and we talked about this at our last meeting, that we would really like to add an assistant director of instruction as well as an administrative intern at the middle school level, so that we could start planning for next school year. And those are really critical positions and are budget neutral. So we'd like the board's authority to fill both of those. And then table 3, we really talked about as a team in terms of which positions do we need right now in order, irregardless of state funding, that we feel comfortable we would have funding for. And so we really focused at the middle school and the crowdedness of those class sizes, because we know regardless of construction growth that those students are coming, and those class sizes will be well above what the board guidelines are for us. So we would like the board to approve adding the classroom educators and the reading para at the middle school level. Then we looked at which positions do we need to build upon the neighborhood model that is started in middle school. And that was the counselor position and the associate principal position, that we would really like to get those positions hired, start planning for that for the fall, particularly if we're not going to be able to be in school the rest of this year, that transition to the start of next school year is going to be really, really critical. And we also know historically that posting administrator and student services positions now gives us the strongest pool available. Additionally, if you look at the 4 positions in table 3, those are positions that would be much more challenging to fill in October, because we're working on student schedules now. It's hard to add new classes in October, as well as, to implement neighborhood model once the school year has started. So when we really focused in on what do we need from the board tonight, looking at tables 1, 2, and 3 is our recommendation.
Thank you. Barb, any questions on that?
No,
Troy?
good.
No questions from me.
Tim?
No, nothing from me. Thank you.
Anna?
No, no questions.
Courtney?
No questions.
Krista?
Nope.
Nor do I. So we've gone through the revenue and expenditure one. If you look at page 7 of the recommendation, it's a summary of the administration's current position, which is adopting at least a projection for revenue at 75 students and 75% of state funding and increasing open enrollments. That's a conservative projection, kind of what we think is a worst case scenario. And then the funding of positions under that, the fixed cost elements, and then the staffing stuff that Gina just went through, that includes either budget neutral stuff that they want authority to fill, or positions that require fill funding that are either legally mandated or deemed essential by administration. Taking those, the conservative revenue estimate, and then the expenditures less the stuff that are flexible at this point, leaves us with about $500,000 of flexibility to see what the course looks like. In addition to the worst case scenario, we have some fund balance for a bridge if we want to make a decision to go that way. So we're in good shape, but I think what we're hearing from the administration tonight is to get on the staffing and to fill those needs, they need the approval tonight to proceed in the best manner for our students for next year. So I would need a motion to approve that if anyone's so inclined.
Yeah, I just want to say how much I appreciate, first of all, the summary that was put together since we got together the last time. This really does cut through pages and pages of data for us. It really helped me boil things down very easily. And I just really appreciate the organization, the ability to take a close look at, what's most probable, what's second most probable, third most probable, et cetera. And provide us with a lot of flexibility here in a very simple to understand format. So I really do appreciate that. I know a lot of people had a hand in doing that. I would definitely move to approve the staffing report as presented, knowing that the ones labeled as flexible are truly flexible until we have more information. So thank you for putting this all together.
Thank you.
From Tim to approve the administration's recommendation. Is there a second?
This is Anna. I will second that motion.
Got a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Seeing no discussion, could you take the roll?
Mr. LeBrun,
Yes.
Ms. Buzak,
Yes.
Ms. Feeney,
Yes.
Ms. Oderico, Ms. Flanagan,
Yes.
Mr. Pinkrack,
Yes.
Mr. Zach.
Yes, motion carries 7-0. I'd echo what Tim said. Thank you to the administration for putting together over the last couple of months Plan A and then Plan B in a really timely and concise manner for us, and one that's really flexible. We appreciate all the work that's gone into this. Thank you, board members. Part of the ability of the administration to put this material before you was because we got such good feedback over the last 2 meetings that were direct and concise and honed in on exactly where the interests were that we were able to develop this. And thanks for doing your homework and for all the information that you provided to us, particularly in a challenging format remotely. So I think we're in as good a position as we can be as a district moving forward in our budget cycle, given great economic uncertainty. But it allows us to do some staffing things and get on top of next year. So thank you, Brian, on behalf of the board and the administration team. All right, that takes us to information items, election update.
Krista, I am happy to do this unless you were planning on it.
No, go ahead.
What? Oh, I'm sorry, I jumped. Committee reports. Thank you, Katie. We got all of committee reports. Policy hasn't met, and I've basically, talked with Gina's been underwater, Krista, but we've got stuff that in the next month or so, maybe you and I should talk about what's on the table.
Sure.
Yep, got it. Okay. Vision Steering Committee, Troy.
So we met last Wednesday virtually, and it was kind of a restart of this committee. As you remember, we were on hiatus for about a year. So it was our first meeting back. We had 2 agenda items. The first one was planning for the future, and we just did some brainstorming as a group to talk about where we wanted to take this committee in the next year and the things that we wanted to work on. So it was a really good brainstorming session. We had really good input from all attendees, and we came up with a list of about 15 different items, kind of scattered all across the board. So I'm going to work with Leslie on that to kind of condense that down into some kind of big heading items, and that'll guide us over the next year as to some of the things we're going to be working on. The second agenda topic was the board workshop agenda. So we have a board workshop scheduled for May 26th, I believe, a Tuesday. And we began discussions about, probably needing to reimagine that workshop, as we may still be on safe at home orders at that time. So we just tossed around some ideas of what that might look like. One of the things that we may think we would want to do is to still hold a virtual meeting on May 26th to talk about more of the board operating procedures as a refresher for all of us, and we'll have 2 new board members coming on at that time, kind of give us an opportunity to revisit how we operate as a board. We would do that virtually on May 26th. And then we would look to schedule an in-person workshop, potentially in July, where we could focus more on visioning. And we wouldn't table the visioning topic until July. We do some pre-work and possibly do some one-on-one interviews with board members to try and shape that agenda. So that's kind of what we're up to. The brainstorming topics were included in the weekly letter this past week, so I would encourage any board members to send me a note if there's anything that you saw that you felt was missing and that you thought we should add to that list. That's it.
Yep, and Troy, one of the things that we talked about, Troy and I talked yesterday briefly, is that if we have room on our May 11th agenda, we may also do some of that board workshop stuff on the 11th, but that we've got to flush out our agenda for that. And we always have the fallback date of the 26th. So,
yep.
Okay, anybody have any questions of Troy or members of the visioning committee? Okay, seeing none, now we can go to informational updates. Giving thumbs up from Katie. Election update.
I'd ask Krista as our board clerk to add anything that she'd like. As of today, we have no results, and Katie has told me that the clerks are going to be dropping off the results tomorrow morning. This gives us plenty of time for our annual board canvas, which is a public meeting that's scheduled for Thursday morning, and Krista as board clerk will lead that canvas on Thursday morning, and I'll be able to report to board members the results once the canvas is complete. And of course, the canvas is held in accordance with state law, with a few little variations this year because normally we would have already had it complete. So Krista, anything you'd like to add?
No, just that we will be canvassing tomorrow morning. And so hopefully we'll be able to announce results shortly thereafter.
Thursday morning.
Sorry. No, is it?
Yeah.
Katie?
Thursday.
They don't have them yet.
Oh, sorry. Okay. So yes, as soon as we have them, we'll let everybody know.
I apologize if I gave you the wrong date. It is
Nope.
Thursday.
Nope, I got it. I just looked at the, what day is it, right?
Isn't that the truth? Okay, any questions on election? All right, distance learning update.
Leslie and John will lead us with that.
All right. So we have, I think Katie was going to try to pull up a slide, or I can share it with everybody on the Hangout. Ooh, Katie's presenting. Awesome. There we go. So we are in, obviously, the early stages yet, but we've had a little bit of time under our belts. After the first 3 days of distance learning, we sent all parents a survey asking them for their feedback. It was used to, I guess, get an idea not only of how much time their children were spending, because we've heard from other districts that that's a big challenge of providing the right amount of instruction and the right amount of time. But also to ask them basically, like, did you have any technological challenges? And then what went well for your child and what could be improved? So from that, we got about 1,500 responses, which is actually really high when you think about it. We asked parents and guardians to take it once for each child who they have doing in the school district during distance learning. So like I have 3 children in school, so I took it once for each of my kids, because the experience of one student, you know, at the high school might be really different than a student at the middle school. And that was especially important because we have different expected amounts of time that we think that each that students from different ages should spend per day. That's based on DPI recommendations. So the feedback came back, and as you can imagine, from 1,500 people, there was a lot, and there were a lot of different opinions. One of the big ones that came through as an inconsistent piece of feedback was that some parents wanted more work. They said, this is pretty easy, this is not a huge deal. And then we had some who wanted less work. And, you know, it was an interesting, it's something to grapple with. So, you know, it's having to calibrate how much work it takes for a student to do can be kind of difficult. And obviously we know that students come from a variety of different situations. So that's a difficult one to make recommendations across the board, but I do know from talking with teachers and principals and coaches that we're trying to address that, and we're trying to individualize some of those things. Some teachers that I've heard from have said they've started doing the assignments themselves that they're assigning to their students, and then say multiplying by 2 or 3 the amount of time it takes to get a good sense of that. So there's been a lot of work on that. There were some technical issues. You know, there were some platforms that just didn't work that day, which aren't in our control. It was third-party vendors, and obviously that came up. But the things that are in our control, we found there were 3 really consistent themes from parents, and these are basically requests. And the first one was to try to streamline and simplify the assignments themselves and the process of accessing them. So we tried to set that up to begin with, taking our cue from other districts that had started earlier by making a Google Doc that one for each school with the teachers' names, and then a link that parents can click on to see the assignments for that teacher. That's gone pretty well. However, there are a wide variety of platforms that people have used, and although we asked teachers to try to avoid using some new platform, there's still a lot that maybe kids or students, especially in the younger grades, use that parents might not be familiar with. So there was quite a bit of, hey, my kid forgot their password to this particular site, that sort of thing. And so we're trying to make it just more streamlined how to get to that. So there's been some improvements on that. The second one that we got from parent feedback was that videos are really helpful for maintaining relationships. And, you know, we heard anecdotally, you know, students who are just so excited to see their teacher's face and to hear their voice and that sort of thing. This one has another side to it, which is that some parents don't have, or some families, actually even some staff, don't have really good internet access. And so it makes it difficult, even if a teacher records the video. So not even a real time, like live hangout like we're doing now, but even if a teacher records a video, it can be difficult to access that because videos tend to be large. However, we still took the real consistent feedback from the parents was that videos are actually really helpful. Not only do they make things clear, but they maintain relationships. And the third one was, as is probably not a surprise to anybody, that feedback to students is helpful. And so a lot of parents said more feedback, quicker feedback. And that is really a big challenge. That's the hardest one of these, actually, because, and we've heard this from lots of people, that when you're in a classroom with a bunch of students, there are a lot of cues that you can get to determine whether they understand it or not. So, you know, there's nonverbals, there's sort of the quizzical look, there's a furrowed brow, some of those things, or you can kind of overhear them when they're talking to a neighbor, when they're working on things. And so we don't have that in the online distance learning environment. So it's really important for the students to, you know, provide, I guess, their work back to the teachers quickly, and then the teachers to respond back, so there's not a large lag time. So based on this feedback, we dedicated today's in-service day. We sent this out to all the teachers, and today's in-service was basically dedicated to improving our practice and our delivery method for students and families. And the one other thing other than this, and then Leslie, you can add into whatever I've missed, is that at the high school today, their additional kind of top priority task was to convert or shift over to a pass-fail grading system. And so Jim and his instructional coaches and leadership team put a lot of work into that, along with the tech department, to set up Infinite Campus and get that all facilitated. So that was high school specific at this point, to move to that pass-fail system. But that was a big shift for them that they've been working on. Leslie, what did I miss, or what could be better explained?
I think that was a great summary, John. I just want to mention that the middle school is also going to a pass, no pass system. While they will continue to give numerical scores on standards, they're not moving away from their standards-based system. They are, as a final course grade, so to speak, are doing pass, no pass, as opposed to the traditional ABC system. So they are very much in line with what the high school is doing also. And I think that's helpful. The next thing is, I just want to say that our teachers are amazing. Their ability to adapt to this system and to be leaders amongst one another in this is just, I can't say enough about how terrific they have been. And then finally, while we are a learning institution, during this time period, we are putting our priority on connections and relationships, because it's the social emotional part of learning that has really risen to the top for us, particularly in this time.
Yeah, I should have commented also that the parent feedback actually was overwhelmingly positive as well. So it was super supportive. Some teachers were, called out and praised by name. Others, it was just sort of a general appreciation for everything that's been done. And they really have been great. It's very rare that you see people retool an entire delivery method in days and weeks. It's pretty unprecedented, and it's been really, really amazing to see, and people have been wonderful about collaborating and working together on this. Do you guys have any questions for us about distance learning and where we're going?
Board members, anything for John or Leslie? Thank you, John and Leslie.
I have a question. Barb Feeney here. Do you have any sense of how many families do not have internet access who really need it?
Well, we actually did a survey at the beginning. We actually did a survey last year during registration, and it was a little bit difficult to tell because we had 40, no, I can look it up. We had less than 50 people who indicated they didn't have internet access. So less than 50 families. And then we had a large number of blanks. So people who just didn't respond. And then we had the overwhelming majority who said that they did have internet access. So when this happened, we sent out another survey and asked, again, like, what do you have? What do you need? And we kind of like error checked that initial survey. To address that, we bought, or I guess, we bought them pretty much, 200 Verizon MiFis. They're these mobile internet access points for people generally who live in rural areas there where a broadband provider won't go. What we discovered is that in addition to people who just have no internet, there are some that just don't have good enough internet. They don't have true broadband, or they have data caps. So we ran into some like satellite internet service providers that limit the amount of data per month that can be that can be used. So people started running into data caps. We distributed less than, I think we had distributed about 60 of the MiFis to people, and we were we had 200. We actually gave some to other districts because we didn't need them, and other districts did need them. So we were able to shift that over, and Verizon took care of all the billing on the back end. They're just like, okay, these are getting transferred over, so they're off your books and they're on the other districts. So we're not, and we didn't pay for them up front. Basically, they were free, but you pay a monthly charge. So the other districts are doing, I think we gave a bunch to Middleton and some to somebody else. So basically the devices are free. We just kind of gave them to Middleton, and Middleton now takes over the billing for the data usage on them. And those have been really helpful for those sort of low internet. They're not no internet. They're just kind of like it's slow or it's limited bandwidth. So we've addressed almost everybody. There are some where if they don't have any cellular service where they live and they don't have any internet access, there's really not a lot more we can do other than encourage them to drive up close to one of our schools and hop on the free internet that's provided by a guest network outside each one of our buildings.
Would it just be a violation of the safe at home order to provide some appropriately spaced accommodations for students to come into the schools if they can't access from home?
Well, my guess is that would probably be yes, although I would go to our safety czar and our legal counsel about that one. But that's kind of why we said, hey, you can drive up nearby, stay in your car so you're spaced, but you can go near one of our schools and hop on the internet there.
So at that point, can they download everything they need and then go home, or do they have to stay in that zone to get their work done?
Well, so that's an interesting thing. Oh, I just got an update from Josh Weiss. He said we've actually handed out 112 MiFis. So we've gone up, which is good that we have them. So one of the things that's interesting about this whole design is we kind of encouraged people from the outset to not hold real-time video conferencing with students, because of the lack of internet access that we knew a lot of people had. So if people do have a class that's real-time video conferencing like we're on now, obviously you would have to stay within internet access range in order to participate. What we've encouraged people to do instead is to record videos, record like screencasts, sort of like a flipped classroom model where you record a presentation by the teacher with some explanation and some instructions and upload that into Google Classroom or linked from a Google Doc. And that allows somebody to go to where they have internet access, click on that link from the Google Doc, see all the materials, and download the materials to the computer they're using. So they can download the videos, they can download the PDFs or whatever else. And then once it's on the computer, they can drive back home and then access those things from the computer. Even on a Chromebook, which tends to be web-based, you can still save files onto the hard drive of the Chromebook and access it that way. So some of it really depends on the mode of delivery that people have had, and that's one of those things that we're trying to work through because it is kind of difficult depending on the method of delivery if it really needs to be real time. What we've also said is if you provide something like a Google Hangout for a class, you need to, or if you provide a tech option for things, you need to provide a non-tech option. That was basically in the K2 grades where we didn't send Chromebooks home with every child because they don't normally use a Chromebook every day in grades K through 2. So at the upper grade level, we said, if you do have a like a Google Hangout or a live video conference, you need to provide some way to provide that same thing, but without the synchronous real-time video. There's a whole bunch of stuff that goes into that with creating an educational record if you record it that Gina cautions us all about. But I don't think you care about that type of detail.
Okay, thanks.
Anything? Okay. Any other board members? Anything for Leslie or John? Okay. Good. Thanks, Brian, for the distance learning update. Thanks, Gina. Thanks, John, for that. Next on the agenda is the summer school update. I think we've talked about that a little bit.
Yes, that horse is a little out of the barn already, so I'm not going to repeat myself, except I don't believe I earlier mentioned that the typical start date for summer school has been that first week in July, and we had it tentatively planned for July 6th, but we will make the go or no-go decision no later than the May 11th board meeting. Of course, this is subject to change based on our administrative team discussion tomorrow and anything that we receive from the governor's office or the Department of Public Instruction. Would you like me to continue with
Superintendent's report?
Got a couple of quick items. First, I think everyone knows that the Oregon School District has been honored with the Best Communities for Music Education designation from the NAMM Foundation for our outstanding commitment to music education. This is the second year in a row that our district has received this honor. This designation is awarded to districts that demonstrate outstanding achievement in efforts to provide music access and education to our students. I know, board members, you've heard me say for a number of years, music in the Oregon School District is one of our distinguishing characteristics. And it wouldn't happen without our outstanding music staff and also the tremendous support that we receive from Oregon parents and students regarding our music program. So congratulations to all that have had a hand in that, and best wishes for us to continue into the future. A second item that I have is contingency planning at tomorrow's A-team meeting. We are going to continue to work on contingency plans as it relates to end of the year school events. And I'll say it's a long, long list. We're going to brainstorm and talk about it tomorrow at our virtual A-team meeting. We'll also do some planning for the 2020-21 school year, also known as next year, as we begin our planning for the next school year. And again, to a point that Tim mentioned in terms of prom, yes, we've talked about those sort of once in a lifetime events that young people have had. And you've heard Steve and I chat about, we need to come up with some sort of plan for our graduation. We don't have that yet. And of course, as you know, all of our contingency planning is pending the governor's direction and information that we receive from the Department of Public Instruction. So I hope that your takeaway on this item is we are not sitting idly by. We are planning some items for the future, and as that horizon comes up, we'll be back to the board to talk about it. Then my third item is the board tour of Forest Edge Elementary School. Last Monday evening, we had the opportunity for the board with the appropriate social distancing to tour the Forest Edge Elementary School with the Findorf staff. It is amazing to walk through that building. I wish everyone in the community had that opportunity. But one of the things that I can share is we could walk into a couple of classrooms that are ready for students. They'd be ready for students tomorrow. Now, not every classroom is like that, but it's an awe-inspiring feeling to be standing where literally hundreds of thousands of students will have that educational experience over the next 75 years. We are super excited about the new building and what it's going to mean to our communities and to our families. Thanks to John and Leslie for their quick work on the parent feedback and the survey that we completed 2 weeks ago. We also did a staff survey And we will continue to do some check-ins with that as our distance learning initiative continues. At our Badger Conference call today, I learned the Fab Lab at Stoughton High School is working with a local business to provide or to produce N95 masks. And while I am not an expert on N95 masks, what I've learned today is this white material comes in rolls and sheets, and this local business is working with the high school students at Stoughton to manufacture, I'll say, cut these sheets and then attach adhesive to the mask. I'm certain it's a lot more complicated than that in order to meet all the specifications. But I thought it was very cool that some of our students as in the state of Wisconsin, are working on this very important project. And then my last item, you heard it from John and Leslie, and I'd also like to chime in on that. We are exceedingly proud of the work that our teachers and our entire staff have been able to do as we've marshaled through the first 2 weeks of distance learning. It's clear we are modeling the continuous improvement attitude and approach, and that's been part of a district position paper dating back to the early 1990s. In a nutshell, it's just been awesome and great work. I also want to mention our gratitude and appreciation to our parents and students who are learning and making this situation the best that it can be. It's never going to replace the face-to-face interaction in the teaching and learning process. It's not going to replace the connections that our adults make with young people, but we're making the best of a very difficult situation. And as a board and as a community, we should feel very proud of the work that our teachers, our staff, and of course our students and parents, because we're all working on this together. So that completes my report, unless board members, you have any questions for me.
Any questions of Brian? All right. Hearing none, future agenda will be at our April 27th board meeting. That is our board reorganization meeting. At that meeting, we'll have our new board members, Kevin Merring and Heather Garrison, will be seated. Kevin and Heather will be making arrangements for you to sign your oath because we will not be in person that night, but I'll work with Gina to determine the most appropriate way to have you complete the oath, the written oath. And then at the meeting, we'll be electing officers for the board, the reorg. Anything else on the agenda? Brian and I have not had a chance to connect on those specific items.
One thing that we will do either at that meeting or at the May 11th meeting is the preparation and board approval of our waiver to the Department of Public Instruction.
We're going to do a public hearing.
Yes, and that will require us to hold a public hearing. As I learned from some other Badger Conference districts and some Dane County districts, those have gone quite well in Dane County. So, but we'll follow that state law and we'll work through that process.
Any questions about agenda or items that any board member wishes to be placed on the agenda?
Steve, it's Krista.
Yeah.
One thing I should have mentioned with policy committee is we were working on the anti-hate speech policy. And so what kind of interrupted our work was we were in the process of getting some external feedback, but with the Safer at Home policy, that stalled that feedback a little bit. So I just need to connect with Leslie and with Gina about the process of getting some of that feedback. So that could either be put on April or May agenda if we can get that feedback and then reconvene as a policy committee and get that to the board for approval.
Terrific. Yeah. I mean, you had stuff that really was critical to be together, and this whole mess has really interrupted the progress of the anti-hate policy. Okay, so we've got that noted. Anything else from any other board member?
Steve, one thing I had on my, this is Tim. One thing I had on my schedule for tomorrow, I don't know if it was officially scheduled or something we just talked about, but we were expecting to get back together to review the SRO position. Obviously, we've had lots come up since then, but that is definitely something that's still on our radar, to get back together with the village and the police department to make sure that we see how things were going before everybody was out of school. I think that's a very important check-in to have, even if it's very preliminary. It'll at least give us a gauge on how things were going.
Yep, we're making a note of that, Tim. Thanks. We'll have to talk to the village and see where they're at, because I know they're going through the same kind of discombobulation that we are right now.
You bet.
Anything else from any other board member? Okay, that gets a check out, and I get to go first tonight on that, because with the reorg meeting being the 27th, this is the last meeting for a couple of our members and a couple longstanding members. And so I'm going to say a few words about both of them. We got plaques for each of you, and I didn't deliver those to you, but we'll get them to you. Barb, this is one you're going to be getting. It says WASB. It's got the logo presented, Barb Feeney, for your dedicated service to the Oregon School District, April 2014 through April 2020. And so it's hard to believe you two are, after me, the next two longest serving members and on the board, and we've really had a really good 3-year run of cordial, amicable board relationships. One where we've challenged each other, but really worked well together with each other. And Barb, it's been a pleasure to get to know you and work with you over the past 6 years. I know we started in a little bit different place 6 years ago, but I really quickly came to appreciate what you brought to the board and your reasoned approach to decision making. I have particularly admired a number of difficult votes you had to make where your guiding principle, as it always was laser focused on the districts and our students. And in particular, your focus on environmental issues and raising that and keeping that as one of our board's guiding principles. And, it's no coincidence today that our district is recognized as one of the leaders in environmental practices and environmental curriculum. And I hope you're really proud of Forest Edge, and not only where that sits in the locale, but the fact that it's going to be the first net zero public school building in the state. So you might be going off the board, but you'll be invited back as we do our open houses and go through and see that beautiful building that you helped make possible. I really enjoyed talking with you about your grandkids and seeing the pictures on your grandkids. I know it's been hard the last couple of years being torn with your civic duties as a school board member and your grandma roles. And so I'm really jealous of you that you get to spend time with your grandkids on a more frequent basis, and really going to miss you and wish you just the best. So you get a chance, you and Courtney will get the last 2 words tonight, okay? But that's it. Courtney. I've done this before, Courtney. But you get a plaque too. It says the same thing, except it's got your April 5, 2005 to April 2014 dates, and then April 2017 to April 2020. So that's 12 years of dedicated service to the Oregon School District. 3 years ago, a bunch of us came to your door knocking and asked if you would run again. And you had every reason to say no, but we brought 3 reasons to you to try to twist your arm to do that. The first one was the obvious one, was that no one had stepped up to the plate at that point, and you were a logical step to do that. The next point we made with you was that the next 3 years were going to be involving issues right in your wheelhouse, and that included really moving the path forward. And I have really appreciated over 12 years just talking, visioning about education with you, and really knew 3 years ago we were in a critical place to get that moving and that we really needed your voice on that. So that was a big pitch. We knew that Fitchburg was going to grow. We knew Terravesa was going to be there, and you have been a really strong voice in the district for us to recognize Fitchburg's growing role as part of this district and the growth that was going to take part up there, and bringing insight into what was happening in Fitchburg to us on the board. So that was another factor. And we knew we would be building a new school, and your expertise as an architect and your relationship with the folks at Findorf and Bray were critical to us in terms of getting that school into a design that it is today. And so we pitched all of those to you, and I think that sounded some bell to you and some intrigue. But in the end, it was sort of this feeling, as I want to call it, integrity, Courtney, that's putting aside personal interests for the greater common good. And, you know, you always have had as a personal grounding the core belief that we all have a responsibility as citizens to contribute our time and talents to serve our state and local and federal governments. And that speaks to you first and foremost. And I think when we made that pitch to you, that was all about Courtney Odorico. And so thank you for your time and talent to making this a better place, not only the first 9 years, but the last 3 years. I've really appreciated having you on the board as a good friend. So with that, we'll go through checkout, and then Barb and then Courtney will be last. And the tradition of our board is you guys get to sound the last gong with a motion in a second. Krista.
Sorry, I don't want to take away from Barb and Courtney, but I just want to talk for a second about Friends of Oregon School District to let people know what's happening and really give a shout out to this community and have the board members know, and the administrators and staff and teachers, what an amazing community we have. So we are getting ready to do our 4th food pack that'll come on April 27th since COVID started. Our numbers normally are about 171 food packs. We're now up to 261 kids, which is about 125 families. So that's about a 40% increase that we've seen since this all began. But in terms of what this community has done for a normal year, and we've been doing Friends of Oregon School District for about 4 years, we raised $30,000 about in a year. In the last month, we've raised over $30,000 in 1 month. This community has stepped up to support the kids in need in our district, and they know that kids need food to live. The kids need food to learn. So I just really wanted to say a public shout out to the people in this community, individuals and companies that have stepped up to support our kids during this time. So I wanted to say that, but then also wanted Barb and Courtney to know how much I've appreciated being on the board with them. I've learned a lot from both of them, and we will miss you deeply.
Krista, a question I had for you is, what's the approximate cost each time you do a bag drop, food drop?
So if you look at for about a week to a week and a half period, it's about $50 per food bag. So that kind of gives you a sense. So as we've moved into these COVID bags, it's costing us about $10,000 to $15,000 per time.
Okay. So I guess that you could always welcome additional funds and contributions to the Friends of Oregon School District.
Yeah, and we actually have a little bit of a program going on right now. An anonymous donor has agreed to match up to $5,000 of donations. And then we've had another organization step forward with another $5,000. We're trying to raise $20,000 to get us through what we believe this period will take. And so anybody that donates right now, that will be matched.
Awesome. Thank you, Krista. Anna.
Thanks, Steve. I guess I really just want to thank both Courtney and Barb as well for the great leadership that they've offered for me in my first year. I can't imagine serving with more talented and interesting and creative and passionate people. So thank you for the great questions you've asked and the great leadership you've provided. It has been a huge help for me as a new board member, and I'm really sad to see you go, but I'm really just glad that I got to have a year serving beside you. So thanks for your service.
Thank you, Anna. Tim?
Yeah, I want to echo that as well. I think it has really been it's a treasure to me to have been able to sit next to Barb. Barb has a very unique way of looking at things, and part of it is her engineering background, and because my wife shares very similar deductions in their thinking, it's so interesting to watch Barb process through things. And she always brings up the most practical things that I've never thought of. I just really appreciate her practical thinking and her way of impressing upon others the value of that process that she goes through. Courtney, to come back and do this again after you knew better, for lack of a better term, after you knew what it all involved, I think it's so selfless of you to have done that. And so, as Steve mentioned, integrity, when I think of both of you, those words of integrity and another being principled, very principled in how you gather information and how you focus that information on your principles. I just really appreciate that. And so thank you for the time you've spent with us.
Troy?
Yeah, on a personal note, Barb and Courtney, I just wanted to say that I have learned so much from both of you. You were both practicing equity long before it was a mainstream term or word. And both of you have always conducted yourselves so professionally and so respectfully, and it has been a true honor to serve on this board with you. And Barb, just like Tim has said, have been so many times when you've made a statement or you've asked a question that has really sparked an aha moment with me, and just your unique perspective, your unique ability to ask just the right question at the right time has been pretty incredible. And after you would make those statements or ask those questions, I would find myself with a whole new set of ideas that I would be able to consider on an issue. And Courtney, thank you for showing me the power of holding the long view as paramount. I have often looked to you for guidance on what the board should be focused on, because you have always had that long view focus. And, keeping that focus on the big picture and that vision has really allowed this district to get to where we are today. So that is just an extremely powerful mindset in governance, and I will always try to hold that true as I go forward. So thank you both for being such powerful role models to me. We could talk all night for all of the contributions that you've made to the students of this district, but I just wanted to say a few words about the contributions that you've made to me personally as a fellow board member. It's really appreciated. So thank you, and I have truly been proud to have served on this board with you, and I wish you the best.
Thanks, Troy. Barb?
Well, thank you all for the kind words. It's going to be actually kind of nice to not be working my calendar around board meetings and committee meetings and special retreats, blah, blah, blah. But it's also a little odd to sit here and hear you talking about things that are coming up that I will not be a part of. But it's really an honor to serve as an elected person, and it's really been an honor to serve with all of you on the board. And I just have the highest respect for all of you, but also for the administrative team and all of the staff. I mean, it's an incredible school district, and sometimes I just have to stop myself from talking about it to other people, because I might be becoming a big bore bragging about the Oregon School District. but it's a pretty great place to have a kid in school. I've been fortunate to be a part of some really great things, 2 building referendums, the educational compensation referendum, the path forward, hiring our new superintendent, which is very exciting. But I have to say, one of the things that I'm most proud of and most happy to leave behind, that with all of you, we made the whole child the centerpiece of our values. To me, that's just so impressive and probably fairly unique. And I just, I'm so grateful to have been part of that. Courtney, it's been a real pleasure to serve with you. And I would echo what Troy said, that I've really appreciated hearing you talk about things from the perspective of having been on the board in the past and having that long-term picture. I have the utmost confidence that all of you are going to go on and continue to do great things, and I'm happy to have been part of it.
Thank you, Barb. Courtney?
Wow. No pressure. First, I would say, Barb, right back at you. It's been an honor to serve with you. And when you made the comment a second ago about feeling the void, you think you'll feel a void, just know that they'll never leave you quite alone. You will be called back into service. It's a guarantee with this group. So don't go away too far because they will tap you again. Yeah, gosh, you guys are making me blush. It's been just the privilege of a lifetime to serve my community alongside so many amazing, talented, wonderful people. I can't believe it's been 15 years that I've been involved with you all. Brian, it seems like just yesterday we were sitting in that little room in Rome Corners talking to you. You all are so dedicated and so enthusiastic and have such love in your hearts for the mission of the Oregon School District. And I have said it since day one. I think our children are just incredibly lucky to have such wonderful, focused, loving people around them, from their classroom teachers to staff in the buildings, to the bus drivers, to administrators, right on up to the school board. So I know they're in good hands, and the work will continue. I'm always here in Fitchburg, although I may change my phone number. I don't know. Just kidding. But it's been an honor. And Steve, I can't even say anything about our long-term working relationship. It's been just, I've learned so much from you, and you single-handedly have done so much to move this district in the direction that it's going. I don't think people understand just quite what you've given of yourself to this district. So it's been an honor to work alongside you all these years. I'm going to miss you all. I'm not too far away. I'd be happy I told somebody the other day on our visioning committee meeting that I'd be happy to serve on some task forces in the future. And if you ever have any questions, just give me a holler. But you all are wonderful. Thank you so much for everything you've taught me. And you continue the good work. It's been wonderful. And I move that we adjourn for tonight.
Barb?
I'll second that.
Roll call.
Ms. Enrico,
Yes.
Ms. Feeney,
Yes.
Ms. Flanagan,
Yes.
Mr. Pankratz,
Yes.
Ms. Bijak,
Yes.
Mr. LeBrun,
Yes.
Mr. Zach.
Yes. Meeting is adjourned at 8:29. Thank you, everyone. Be safe.
Well,
Good night, everyone.
I'll miss you.
Miss you too, Courtney.